Welcome everybody, episode 2, Trash Tier No Fear, featuring the Garen god himself, Ft.MarineRevenge. How you doing?
What's up, dude? I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Just a kind of a good week here. Getting ready for patch. I think it's what 5 point. What is it? I don't even know the new season patch.
5.4 is what we're on right now.
Yeah, I think it's dropping on Tuesday. I believe the new patch is heading here with the Bard and all those jungle buffs. All right, well, I'm just here to talk to you about Garen in this series. In case you guys don't know, you're watching for the first time. We talk about lower tier champions or champions that I think and other people think maybe the people playing don't appreciate properly, or maybe they're just not a fan, or maybe they're simply just not playing them. So we're gonna start off with the simple stuff. Who are you?
Unfortunately, my IGN is MarineRevenge. The name is like pretty garbage, to be honest. If I could change it without giving up a little bit of exposure I have right now, I would. But mostly I'm just some high elo Garen player. I've been Diamond 1, Season 3 and 4, and Season 5 I was Masters at the start of the season. Right now I'm in D2 on my main. I'm kind of just practicing a little bit before I try to grind back up. And I've been playing since Season 1.
Okay then, well that's pretty good. So you've been playing since Season 1. Further than that, let me just kind of go into the broad stuff to start with. Any other hobbies besides League? Any anything you like to do outside of that? Other games you might play? I know you've been playing Resident Evil. If you're not streaming League lately.
Oh yeah. I was a really big StarCraft player. When StarCraft 2 came out, I got on that game pretty much right on release. And I wasn't very good at the start. I played Zerg, and Zerg was like pretty weak when the game first released, and Terran was like pretty ridiculous.
Yeah, I played Terran. I would know.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Bio ball for the win.
Like all of the ladder maps were like 64 by 64, and like Zerg's one base. It was just terrible.
Yeah.
But I got pretty good at StarCraft. I hit Masters. I peaked at Masters. And I was Diamond in that game for a few seasons. So I've always been kind of a competitive player. Before StarCraft, I played Counter-Strike Source competitively. Always been amateur, like I've never been professional level in anything, but I've always been like really good at like whatever I do. And I kind of favor like the off-meta strategies. Like in StarCraft, Zerg was considered like the worst race for a really long time, and that was like the main reason I played them.
I follow a similar path. I'm playing competitive Counter. I mean, not competitive Counter-Strike, but competitive Street Fighter as of late, and I play a lot of low tiers in that too. But good to hear you kind of do a similar strategy outside of the game. So mainly StarCraft. You played any other like hobby games as a kid? Like I used to play a lot of like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, PS2.
Oh
PS1,
yeah,
stuff like that. Any other like what was your favorite gaming console, if I had to ask?
I didn't have a console favorite. I've always been a PC gamer, but dude, I grew up on Doom, and
there you go.
I played Doom and like Quake. Quake 2 is actually my favorite single player like old school FPS of all time. Like I loved the Quake 2 campaign. It had like like the id Software engines and just lots of just fun, intense gameplay. And it had this really like ahead of its time level design. It had like an overworld. And
yeah.
it was one of the first like pure action FPSs to incorporate like backtracking.
Now, if I remember correctly, didn't the guy who did a lot of development for id Software work on Duke Nukem? Because I still maintain Duke Nukem 3D had some of the best level design for the same reasons you're saying there. Some really, really in-depth and crazy good just overall level design.
Yeah, I'm not actually too sure what level designers may or may not have worked on both games, but I do know that John Romero is one of the original like Doom founders or whatever, and he went on to have his own company. And but I don't know of anyone going from id to was it 3D Realms?
I believe so. I'm just saying. I remember reading an article about like level design and how it's gone forward or back in fighting it. But that's good. I really enjoy Doom. You play any Brutal Doom? I downloaded that a couple months back.
I have. It was never really my favorite mod. Like
yeah.
when I played Doom, that's kind of how my dad got into computers. Actually, I kind of take after my dad, and I was like 2 or 3 years old when Doom and Doom 2 were out. And I used to like sit on his lap or whatever, and I'd play Doom with him on the keyboard and stuff.
The perfect time to witness acts of extreme violence: chainsaw, fucking LFG to the face, miniguns. Oh, best impressionable weapon age violence. Okay, well, regardless of that, it's good to hear. let's go into the basics now. What is your champion and their role?
Basically, Garen. Well, that's what we're doing the interview on, right, Garen?
Yeah, it's mainly Garen. No, we're here to talk to you about Yasuo. That's obviously what the people want to hear about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would say Garen, and I would say primarily top lane.
Okay, so Garen top, pretty standard. That's usually where people are sending him because of his lack of a lot of things. So Garen top, when it comes to that, I see you're mainly a top laner. Can you talk about any alternate roles you might like to play, or just something you might like to play in general when you don't get top or you don't get Garen or what have you?
Yeah, for a long time, the jungle was decent. With the Season 5 jungle changes, I don't really play jungle too much anymore. I like to play heroes like Tryndamere and Garen and Darius and people like that. Pretty much the only place in the game they have is top. And for a long time, they could jungle as an off-role, like if they got counterpicked or whatever. But unfortunately, with the Season 5 changes, they can't really do that anymore. So now I mostly just play top or support if I don't get top lane, because my Blitzcrank is like out of this world.
Put your fist directly into some anuses in bot lane is usually a good way to win in solo queue. Okay, so that's good to hear. So you used to off lane with jungle, but obviously all those changes have just completely neutered that role, I believe. Okay, so outside of that, the history playing this game, you said you played in you were Diamond 1 in seasons 3 and 4.
Yes.
Okay, so before that, when did you start playing? You know, that kind of thing.
I started playing in 2010. I can't remember the exact champion patch I was on, but I do know that Xin Zhao had come out recently. I think it was probably July of 2010.
I believe that's early season 2. I could be wrong. Maybe earlier. Okay, well, I get a good frame of mind for what you're talking about, though. Jarvan, the Metagolem was the big thing at the time. When Xin Zhao came out, he was insanity, so okay.
Yeah, I do have rank stats from Season 1, so I definitely played during Season 1.
Alright, then. Okay, so Xin Zhao was out. That was when you started playing, and you went from there. Alright, so where are you now, and where are you going? Like, what's the plan currently for streaming? I know you actually said you filed for a partnership today with Twitch. Stream's been going pretty well. I stop in there frequently. So what's like the plan from here on out for Marine Revenge?
If I could ever play professionally, and had the opportunity to play the heroes that I enjoy playing at the top level, I would definitely be interested in that. But to be frank, like, I don't think I'm good enough to play with the very best players in the world. So just laddering. I mean, if I could stay Masters or even Challenger, I would be content with that. And I think entertainment is more where I see myself long term. I think most professional players can't stay competitive for very long. Like, you kind of reach your peak in games like League of Legends pretty quickly, and it's easier for people to catch up than for you to stay ahead. And there's always going to be someone better. So I think at my age now, like, I'm only 22, and like that doesn't sound very old, but to be like, most professional players are like just coming out of high school, like 17, 18 years old. Like, it's where most people get their start. And like, if you look at all the like best players in the world, like most professional gamers that wasn't like Flash or, you know, or Boxer, like these like legendary, unheard of, like absolute best at what they do players, people don't tend to stay competitive past the age of 22 or 23 most of the time. So I either see myself succeeding with my stream, or probably growing up and getting out of the video game business altogether.
Alright then, well, it's good to hear. I understand what you mean by there is a short shelf life for highly competitive players, especially in a game like League. If you're not at the top, you're actively trying to push the person off of the top. It's a very king of the hill mentality. Okay then, so I want you to just briefly summarize Garen, kind of talk about his kit from your perspective. Like, what do you see about this champion? Just kind of try to keep it brief.
Yeah, so super short and sweet. I think Garen is a extremely high scaling DPS champion with a really high all-in and a kit that provides him enough defensive stats to be more offensive focused with his itemization, and just rely on his base kit to keep him just to keep him alive in fights.
Okay, so
like an anti-carry with good damage scaling with and like defensive capabilities.
So he's got the power to really make an offensive. He's more of an offensive oriented champion from the way you stand, but he has the tools in his kit to still be able to tank up, and he's a very high damage scaling bruiser is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, he is. He scales with critical strike chance, which is one of the highest, scaling multiplicative damage stats in the game.
Hmm.
Basically, no other bruiser, no other real bruiser can make that claim. So he has this like edge that I don't think people take advantage of enough. That he has over these other characters. Yeah, yeah.
We'll go into that in detail. I understand what you mean, though. We'll go into that in more detail as we go on here. So, how do you feel? Actually, that's the next question. How do you feel about people's perception of Garen? Like, how do you feel about how people feel about him? Do you think they're right about him? Do you think they're wrong about him? Why? That sort of thing.
Yeah, I think most people are mistaken. Usually people think of Garen as like a tank champion because he gets lots of defensive stats from his W and he has high base HP and he's not particularly mobile. So people tend to see him as a tank. And that's true to an extent, but Garen doesn't do the things that other tanks do. Other tanks can initiate or lock down or isolate specific champions, or at least force the enemy team to expend resources on them in some way. And a full tank Garen just doesn't do that. A full tank Garen doesn't really do very much damage, and because Garen has no hard crowd control, no real mobility, no real zoning pressure, he has decently high base damages on his kit, but if you don't itemize for it, that base damage isn't going to matter late game. So he doesn't really do any of the things that tanks do. So I tend to see his kit as a champion who builds a little bit of defense and is as tanky as the guy who built a lot of defense. And then you can use your other slots in gold towards that unique crit-based offensive scaling.
So you tend to kind of prioritize the fact that he gets crit integrated into his E, he's got a very good execute with his R, and his W passive is just enough to kind of make him as effectively tanky as somebody like a Maokai or somebody who really doesn't get that base like tankiness he gets. I see what you mean from that. I actually kind of learned a lot from what your Garen guide said in regards to that. Like, people aren't really playing him right. They just see him and they go, okay, Sunfire, Warmogs, Randuins, I'll be able to deal enough damage, and that's simply not true. And they're wasting one of his key points, which is his E crits. His R is very reliable and all these things. Okay, so that's very good to hear. So, how do you feel about Season 5? Not necessarily about Garen, we'll talk about that afterwards, but how do you feel Season 5 has changed the game, maybe for better or worse, if you try to keep it brief like I said? Do you think there's something that Season 5 has done about the game? I guess jungle would be the primary.
I think above all, man, games are just way too long.
Yeah, just things
games are just too long. Like, they used to end quickly. Like, you could close out a game if you were ahead pretty easily before, and now there's just a lot of things you have to do before you can close out a game. Most of the time, you have to get Baron before you can close out a game right now, and getting Baron takes a while, even when you're ahead, because it's so risky to do Baron if it's not like guaranteed. And like, God forbid, if the enemy team gets Baron, like when you're trying to get it yourself, in a game where you already had, like, the games just go on forever, especially if you make mistakes when you have the lead.
Yeah, the rubber banding, I like to call that the Mario Kart syndrome, where the game has reached, the meta has created this thing of whoever fucks up or whoever gets that lucky break towards the later half of the game is usually going to win the game off of it, with the death timers being a minute or so once everybody's reaching level 17, 18. I'm seeing that a lot. I'm kind of lucky, I guess. The champion I play kind of benefits from that late game thing, but I guess Garen might not because of all the dashes getting slung around. You need that flash to make a play. Alright then, yeah, outside of that, maybe jungle. But how do you feel about that regarding Garen? Do you think the changes in the items, like, I actually had a couple people telling me that, hey, Righteous Glory is going to be awesome for Garen, and I'm just saying, I don't know about that. It doesn't solve any of his problems, but is there anything you think Season 5 did that really helped Garen or hurt Garen?
I mean, games lasting longer than they used to definitely hurts. I would say overall the changes aren't too bad. I think the only thing that's really noticeable is because of the changes to growth stats early game, with their focus being on reducing snowballing when you have level advantages. I do find that it's a little bit harder for Garen to get like a small lead in lane and then just auto win off that, which is probably good for game health, but for Garen specifically, it's a bit of a nerf to his solo queue playstyle.
Yeah, you really want to be that bully once you get that lead. You don't want to let it go. It is a little harder these days. Okay, so when you think about Garen, who does he? This is kind of just a summary from the point of view of somebody who's mained him for a certain time. Who does he excel? This is kind of a basic question, like I said. Who does he excel against, and who does he kind of get beat by? Like, who are his? When you see this matchup, are you're smiling, and when you see this matchup, you're pissed off. You say, why did I pick Garen?
Yeah, generally he beats melee champions, and he generally loses to most ranged heroes. He just doesn't have enough mobility, or and he hasn't scaled into his stats yet. Um, Early game, so you just can't deal with like ranged harass. Like anybody who can poke Garen really well early can just stay away from him and eventually just outlast him. But Garen tends to win against most melee matchups just because the lack of mobility doesn't really hurt too much when you're playing against people who only can straight up trade with you basically.
All right then.
And Garen's straight up trade is really strong.
Yeah, once you actually close that gap, it is pretty easy to win the trade. But outside of that, if you get somebody who can kite well enough or do anything to you, you're kind of screwed.
Yeah, I would say it mostly comes down to Garen's 100-0 all in is stronger than most champions by a pretty wide margin. Like if there's like any melee bruiser that could out all in somebody, it would have to be like Riven or Darius. Like those are the only two champs that come to mind that have more straight up kill potential early game.
Yeah, it's very hard to have a champion that's actually got more single target kill potential. Funny you mentioned Darius and Riven. They both have that execute. I can't really think of any other champions who have such a strong I win and I finalize this death as well as he does, or those two do. I would say that yeah, you're very on track with that one. Okay, outside of what we just discussed, what is the main thing that somebody trying to play Garen should keep in mind with to actually win the game? What is something you try to mentally go back to if you're playing him and you think, okay, I know I want to get kills, I know I want to do this, I want to dominate my lane, but is there anything in particular that a Garen player has to do if they want to win with Garen?
Yeah, I would say probably the number one thing is if you are tanky enough to enter the back line, then you should always be trying to 100-0 whichever carry is most important to take out. With one exception, against teams with like melee assassins, your silence is like particularly good for making them useless when they jump in. Like basically to win with Garen, you just have to use his kit to take out like the priority target, like whoever that is. Because Garen can usually tank an AD carry through their entire, like, through all their auto attacks long enough to get his full combo off. Yeah,
spell
basically.
Rotation. Graves's buckshot isn't going to do a whole lot if you've got the Thorn Mail or the Randuin's in the inventory.
Yeah, it's pretty much just Garen can survive through a lot of damage, but the only thing he does is provide damage himself, unless you're silencing a target that benefits a lot from being silenced. So you just want to make sure you're trying to soak damage by forcing yourself onto a priority target and trying to kill them.
Okay, so you've got to make the enemy team react to you by, first off, having some tankiness so you don't get melted, and second of all, having enough damage or the ability to get close enough to... You got to be a threat to the carry and soak that damage, kind of like a Mundo would, in that you have to be that threat in the front line in the pits of like the team fight.
Yeah, but you were kind of asking like what's like the number one thing someone has to do, like okay. Itemization and stuff aside, you want to make sure in team fights you're trying to zone out a priority carry and kill them if you can.
Okay, so isolation is the key to winning a team fight and kind of winning the game with Garen.
Yeah, getting in one person's face and killing them before they kill you.
Okay then. On the downsides when it comes to Garen, what do you think is the biggest pitfall of him? Like if you were talking about him, something that really keeps him from winning games, and furthermore, past that, I know his range obviously you said was a bad thing. What do you think you can do to work around that like negative part of his kit? What is something that you do maybe personally in game that you try to kind of minimize that problem? Like what's the main thing that Garen has trouble with, and how do you work around it?
I think the Garen's biggest problem, especially if we're talking about carrying games with Garen, is he lacks engage. So you're always relying on your team to start a fight, like start a favorable fight, so that you can win. Um, the only thing Garen can really do to uh, basically combat that on his own is I've gotten into the habit of only using Flash to get kills on Garen. I try really, really, really hard to not ever use Flash defensively on Garen because having Flash up means you can Flash silence one person and kill them before your silence has run out, basically allowing them to flash away. So try to use your Flash offensively as much as you possibly can. And like, if you have to take a death to save to come back to the fight later with Flash up to get a kill, like that's always worth. Like sometimes you have to like think ahead about your Flash, and usually it's more important to have it available to dive someone than it is to live. Um, and I would say the only other thing you can really do is build items like Ghost Blade or Static Shiv to give you that move speed that you might need to close the gap on certain targets when you don't have Flash to rely on.
Okay, so you really want to prioritize that Flash, not in a defensive sense. You don't want to take that passive approach to using Flash. It's all or nothing. You really want to get his job done by getting in there and finishing off the carry.
Yeah.
Okay then. So what is it's kind of a general question again. What is something that you didn't know about Garen when you first started playing him that you know now after maining him for maybe so many games? Do you have a rough estimate on how many games you might have played on Garen at this point?
Well, I've been playing him since season 3 across 3 or 4 accounts. I would say, I would say at least 1,000, and I would say that that's probably lowballing.
That's a good number. Well, regardless.
1,500 is probably more accurate.
Okay, well, around that era. So, like I said, what is something you didn't know when you were at 1 or 2 games, maybe you played jokingly, that you learned after all those, maybe that 1,500, 1,500 games?
Well, before I started playing Garen, I didn't realize that his W actually gave tenacity. I always knew it made him tankier when he activated it, but I didn't realize it actually gave him tenacity, and I thought that was a really big deal. One of the other things too is like from a numbers perspective or a stat perspective, I learned that Garen's in the top 5 of health at level 1, the top 5 health at level 18, the top like 10 people's base AD at level 18. He's yeah, like he's just a ball of stats. He's one of the highest armors at level 1. Like Garen's just really really high stat wise, and I think that's one of his biggest strengths. Like between him having high base defensive stats and high base damage stats, and then a kit that scales really well both offensively and defensively as long as you itemize correctly. Like in terms of statistics, I think Garen's probably the strongest champion in the game on raw stats.
Okay, so you kind of learned to throw those raw stats around. You learned that, he's not just his kit. He's more of this ball of stats that is centered around the kit. Just his ability to say, hey, I'm stronger than you if I close that gap.
Yeah, always, always. That's definitely one of Garen's defining characteristics. Equal items, equal gold. He's always stronger than someone if he can get in melee range.
He's always got that bow cocked ready to throw, I hear you. All right, then. Outside of that, we're looking at mainly just him from a discussion standpoint. That's mainly all of the questions I wanted to ask. Just from here on out, I just want to ask, maybe you got some shout-outs, some comments about Garen, anything on your mind about League right now?
I mean, shout-outs. Well, actually, we'll do shout-outs at the end, I guess.
Oh, go for it. No, this is almost the end.
Yeah,
we're
okay.
going for about 25 minutes regardless.
I gotcha. Well, general thoughts. Garen's a lot stronger than most people give him credit for. I've played an account from unranked to diamond only playing Garen, and I had like a 75 or some odd % win rate. He's really good. I think he needs some small changes to ever be competitively viable, like at a consistent manner. I don't think he needs more damage. I don't think he needs more tankiness. I think he just needs to be more consistent. And I think it'd be really cool if Riot looked at making his Q more reliable late game. Either by removing the self slow on his spin when he spins through minions, like he slows himself. If that came off at late ranks of spin, or if his Q Gave him slow immunity during the move speed portion of it.
You know, another small buff they actually did to Mordekaiser recently that might be good is giving him some extra range when he uses it. Just a little bit could go a long way.
Yeah, I mean, even that, like an extra 75 range can make a big difference, and that would actually match his spin radius. I think it's what 235 or something.
Yeah. Yes, it
So
is.
it's a little bit over 200, which was what it would be. But yeah, I mean, something like that could be a big deal. Like just some small consistency changes, and I think Garen can be competitively viable.
Okay, so that's good to hear. I think that you're right when it comes to he's got the damage, he's got the tankiness from his W. You don't need to do anything crazy with him, but if he ever wants to be anything more than kind of a, I think in the general consensus people would consider him okay, but he does have pretty big problems.
Yeah.
All right. Well, regarding that, let's go back towards the shoutouts. If you want to talk to anybody in stream right now, go ahead. Now we're gonna get into the last question and we'll do it.
I mean, I don't have any sponsors or anything, so no.
Oh, don't worry. We're gonna get you sponsored, my friend. We'll find a way. We're gonna get that Twitch sponsorship, and then we're gonna go to own.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. Then.
But the only people I would give a shout out to, I guess, is I guess Tony, the guy I duo queue with, Alistair, the professional Alistair player.
Yeah, there you
go. He provides me a lot of help with stream and stuff like that, and a lot of general support. He's a good guy. And maybe shout outs to Certain Leet and Gypsy Lord. They're the two riders working on Garen. Hopefully they don't fuck him up. That would be greatly appreciated.
Did they do some posts about their changes to him?
No, but I talk to them privately occasionally to see what they're up to.
Okay.
So, I mean, hopefully they don't fuck them up. I mean, that's all I can say. Shout out to them, and hopefully they do a good job.
I wish I had a link to somebody who played Gangplank. Okay, well, outside of that, final couple questions. First off, let me just say this straight out. You guys can follow Marine Revenge over at twitch.tv/MarineRevenge. He does play Garen pretty frequently. Pretty good stream. He just applied for partnership. He's been averaging pretty good viewers. I've been watching for a long time. I'll just say I'm a pretty big fan. I've been in there a couple times. You've said hi. Feel free to go over there, guys. He's a great streamer. He's been playing some Resident Evil. If you catch him playing streaming at Resident Evil, he is quite afraid of everything going on around him. It's quite hilarious to watch. I don't know if you guys have seen it. Are you playing that tonight? Did you say?
I'm probably gonna do another game or two league, and I'm gonna try and get some Resident Evil in. Yeah.
Whose campaign are you doing? Jill's or Chris's?
Jill right now. I never actually played the game on the original PlayStation, so.
I was actually a Resident Evil fiend back in the day. I used to do speedruns of 2, and I came within a few minutes of getting to the speedrunner, but I never posted anything. Final question and final thing kind of to pass the buck. Who is a champion that you think that people are currently sleeping on in maybe a certain role, or somebody you think that nobody's paying attention to that is currently in that trash tier I kind of try to talk about that maybe could come out and be a sleeper? Like currently and last time, I think right now Udyr's really slept on. I think he's still a great top and mid laner that nobody's really talking about. I mean, jungler, not mid laner.
I don't want to give the secrets away, but I think Vlad is really good right now. I think, like, I've seen some people play Vlad in solo queue somewhat recently, which is kind of a new thing right now for a long time.
I've seen a few actually too.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are kind of watching. I think people are figuring out. I also think Rek'Sai top is pretty crazy right now. Like, I've only played a couple games of it, but it feels really strong.
I talked to Morello at PAX. I was there 2 days ago, and he, I didn't talk to him at length, but he mentioned something about he wants to. He was like chuckling about they've got more champs to nerf, and I just thought, oh Jesus, I hope they don't change some of the people like the older champs, like the old champs that just have crazy scaling. Vlad's one of them. Vlad and Aurelia, I'd say, are probably the ones that are in his crosshairs. I think he's got them in mind. Yeah,
I think Aurelia could fuck off and no one would be upset. But
you're far from the only one who thinks that. Everybody who spams that dumb meme on the Reddits or on anything, oh, better nerf Aurelia. I just cringe hard. I cringe so hard I think my butthole recedes into my lower intestine for a certain amount of time. I just can't stand her design. It's awful.
Dude, that stun is crazy. That's like the worst thing about her right now.
You could point to every part of her kit and talk about how it's crazy, and it wouldn't just be meme garbage. It would be legitimate concerns about how retarded her kit is. She's got a gap closer that resets on death. How insane is that?
Yeah, dude, it's ridiculous. They should disable that for minions.
They should disable her whole champion. That'd be great. The only thing I hope they don't disable is Dad Ass and the Frostbutt skin. Can't get enough. Can't get enough. Nate Dogg, rest in peace. Thank you so much for talking to us today, Marine Revenge. Guys, stop by his stream, give him a follow. I heavily recommended it. You cannot experience the dank memes that you get in his chat. They are too fresh. It's just, it should be against the law. Thank you guys for watching today. This has been Trash Tier No Fear Episode 2, featuring Marine Revenge. Y'all have a good night.